Welcome to episode 3 of Scorned by Muses, the Self-Flagellation of MoMA. We're here at the Museum of Modern Art. We're going to go see an exhibition called Norman Teague Jam Sessions. I'd never heard of Teague before. He's a Chicago-based artist and designer. Seems like he makes most of his money designing custom furniture. In this show, he's trying to take down modernism. Let's go take a look. I mean, this is more a curatorial problem than anything else because it's actually just not clear what you're supposed to even be getting out of this show without reading that giant wall text out front. Maybe I'm going to go do that and then come back in here. This is really stupid. This is a really stupid show. So the wall text says, "What belongs in a museum and who decides? How can we be more democratic in defining value? As a leading arbiter of taste, style, and form, the Museum of Modern Art played an instrumental role in shaping the history of modern design. Norman Teague invites us to reimagine the past by moving beyond good modern design, as defined by institutions like MoMA. Drawing inspiration from artists and designers traditionally excluded from museums and assisted by generative AI, he offers a reinterpretation of design history. These reimaginings, posters and full-scale prototypes shown alongside objects from MoMA's collection, foreground makers of color and embody the cooperative, inventive spirit that guides Norman Teague Design Studios." I mean, it's basically adding ornamentation to objects which were devoid of ornamentation, but the ornamentation that he's adding back onto these objects is just totally arbitrary. So he took these salt shakers, which were made in 1952, which are trying to be totally objective and modernist, and he's like, okay, I'm going to use AI to redesign these salt shakers to take into account the cultural particularities of 1953 and what was happening in black culture in 1953. So you get these salt shakers, which have some whack, tiki hula skirt on or something. And then he has these random references that he's drawing from: collectivist activism, Afro-traditionalism, and abstraction. I mean, this is the most postmodern shit I've ever seen in my fucking life. I think this is one of the objects he made, which just as a piece of functionalist design is way clunkier than the thing which he is critiquing. It's way clunkier and it doesn't even really... Yeah, this is why the whole show doesn't work. Because he's making this, which is just kind of like IKEA-style functionalism, and this is just something he actually made versus something he prompted the AI to do. So he can't actually undermine the original in the same way that he's trying to undermine the original with the salt shakers and the other thing, because he's just making a piece of unadorned functionalist design. Maybe it says some African word on there or something. I guess that's his intervention. Is it says, I don't know what it is. What does that say? What does that mean? I don't know. There's nothing here that tells me what that says or means. When I type this into Google Translate, it says that this is the Yoruba word for October, and the Yoruba people are a West African ethnic group who mainly inhabit parts of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. So there you go. That's some context that could have been on the wall text. He's inspired by this,
modernist Italian clock, or not clock, calendar. Very dumb. I mean, this is a classic chair, right? This like Distill Bauhaus chair. And then he prompted AI to make an alternate version of this chair, which has like chains and like traditional textiles on it. The AI prompt says deep-seated lounge chair with tall back, and the text is too small for this, a graphic design problem, more than anything, bad curatorial. Whoever curated this show, you're fired. And it doesn't even like really tell you what he's going for. He just has like these vague words. This one says Black Enlistment, Horace Pippin, and World War I. It's very dystopian, actually. And maybe that's the point. He's like trying to undermine the utopia of this, which this should like open up a radical new way that the world could be, which is what this chair was actually trying to do. I mean, it's uncomfortable as shit, I'm sure, but it was trying to like reimagine the world, and this is actually like foreclosing the world in this very surface level way. Like 1918 was not about transcendent potential. 1918 was about Black Enlistment, Horace Pippin, and World War I. Maybe that's the way it looks from the present, and that's, I guess, one of the failings of the show, or the failings of this way of thought. And so I guess this is one he made. This is like a prototype he made, which feels this one feels like a design student thesis project, like an undergraduate design student thesis project. It's made out of like popsicle sticks, basically. See, this is like, again, the fucking curation is so bad. Like on that poster should not be this image. On that poster should be the image of this. I'm gonna call MoMA and find out who curated the show, because I have a lot of questions and a lot of problems. The idea for the show is bad, and the execution is even worse. It's just so goofy. I wonder whose idea this was. Was this Teague's idea? Or was this, I bet you this was MoMA's idea. I bet this wasn't Teague's idea. I bet this was MoMA's idea, and they wanted to find a black designer to like question modernism, to critique the institution, which is their own institution. I mean, we're in the holy cathedral of modernism right now. And so they wanted to invite a black guy to like whip them. And he did a terrible job. Yeah, they wanted to be flagellated by a black man. MoMA wanted to be flagellated by a black man, and he did a terrible job. He needs a better whip. It's like maybe they actually just wanted to show off their modernist design collection, but if they did that, they would seem like racists or something. So they were like trying to hedge their bets by saying, no, we got this like black guy to design an alternate history of what modernism could have been or what design could have been. And the designs are all shit. And the motivation behind the design is weak. And it's just, it's totally incoherent and stupid. This is the worst show I've probably seen in a really long time, actually. You could have just had a beautiful exhibition of high modernist design, and it would have been fine. You don't need to be self-critical in this phony way that I guarantee you almost nobody coming into this exhibition has any fucking clue what these images up here are supposed to mean.
I climbed up to the 5th floor of the museum where there's a gallery devoted to modernist architecture. I was looking at this drawing by Le Corbusier, and I ran into a German woman who had some ambivalent feelings about modernism.
I mean, he was, no discussion, he did great designs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of this style when there's not such a genius designing it with the Corbusier style.
Right.
It gets brutal.
Yeah.
It can be really brutal. So
Yeah.
it's not just
And then this comes back.
They
Yeah.
call it postmodern.
Postmodern. Exactly.
The kind of revolt against modernist design that Teague mounts in his jam sessions show is nothing new. In 1980, the Venice Biennale for the first time introduced a section for architecture. The exhibition, titled The Presence of the Past, was not simply a showcase. It staked out an ideological position against modernism. The main hall of the exhibition featured a series of facades that formed a street called the Strada Novissima, which translates to English as the newest street. The facades were a rejection of the rectangular glass and steel towers of the so-called international style, which had come to dominate 20th century architecture. The facades demonstrated a more pluralistic approach to architecture, which reintroduced some of the ornamentation that had been stripped away over the preceding decades. For many, this 1980 Venice Biennale was the moment when postmodernism as a tendency became legitimated within mainstream architecture and design. The first building to incorporate this new idea as part of its design was this building. It was designed by Philip Johnson and completed in 1982. At the time, it was the headquarters of AT&T, located at 550 Madison Avenue in Manhattan. The massive split pediment at the top of the building is its distinguishing feature, and it earned the nickname the Chippendale Building because it resembles a Chippendale chest of drawers. For the modernist ideologues like Mies van der Rohe, the pediment would have been an utter abomination. For the modernists, all ornamentation and all reference to the past had to be eradicated. The future was all that mattered, and what it held was progress. I rented a car and drove to New Canaan, Connecticut to see firsthand what that vision of progress looked like.
Behind me is the Glass House. It's the perfect embodiment of the modernist ethos. It's also designed by the same guy who designed the Chippendale Building.
Now, ornament had disappeared up to that time anyhow because it was too expensive and there were no more craftsmen. That's still true. Now, of course, we use pastiche ornament. We imitate or make moldings of old ornaments. That's the way it's come back in a strange way. But that principle of avoidance of ornament was the easiest to do. So if you then believe in volume, not mass, you can't put tops on buildings. Of course, any angle like that was taboo. Had to have a flat roof. And by that time, it was pretty well codified. The international style, we had Weißenhofsiedlung, which is the epitome. That was the high point of the international style, when everybody had to do a flat roof. Everybody had to be white. Everybody had to use stucco. And they all did. They saluted and did whatever Mies said. He was a kid at the time, and kid being architecture being 40. And there was an amazing thing for a kid to do, to get all the great architects together and make them all do the same building.
Johnson studied under the former Bauhaus director Walter Gropius as a student at Harvard. And all the buildings of his early career, like this one, were heavily influenced by the Bauhaus ethos. The house in which I'm standing was built in 1949. It bears a striking resemblance to Mies's Farnsworth House in Plainview, Illinois, and as a good student of Mies, Johnson followed the master's dictum: it's better to be good than to be original. On the same property as the glass house, Johnson built a sculpture gallery, which houses works by Frank Stella, Robert Morris, and Bruce Nauman. The gallery attendant didn't know much about the idea of postmodernism, but she became very excited once I started talking about it.
Yeah, what's changed since then, postmodernism?
Yeah, we're still in that, yeah.
Don't you think this property, in a sense, if you were going to translate this property into fine art, that Philip Johnson was the postmodernist architect?
Well, Philip Johnson's very interesting because, so this, like the glass house or this, is very modernist, which was like dispensing with all ornamentation, dispensing with like history in a sense, right? Dispensing with like the Greek columns or like the pediments that you see at the top of buildings, right? Like everything has a flat roof. There's no, I mean, like it's not the ungenerous way to talk about the glass house would be it's like it's totally cold, right?
Yeah.
It's just like this sort of everything's a hard, flat surface.
Right.
There's no like sense of history there. There's no sense of like authentic culture or something like that. And that's what the modernists were trying to dispense with all that. But then Philip Johnson later in his career, like there's a building in the city, used to be the AT&T building.
The entrance gates?
Yes.
So that's where I'm saying the 18.
Yeah, exactly. That has the like big split pediment at the top, right? Which was like postmodernism. That's like the first real monumental building of postmodernism where it's like reintroducing that ornament, you know, which was like, I guess, a rejection of that modernism was too cold, that it just became this dystopian kind of like, you know, every dystopian sci-fi movie, it's like set in a modernist like world, right? Everything is like gray boxes and rigid lines, right? That just became the like bureaucratic state or something.
It's just everything, right?
Now it's just everything. Now it's just totally, and it's just like totally incoherent. Like nobody knows what the hell they're doing.
I mean, painting and landscape and then collage and then feminist and then Gagosian's girlfriend and what is she, I don't remember her name. She does those Lolita paintings. You know, so it's like you're looking at it differently because it's a woman painting.
Right.
They're good paintings.
Yeah.
And then she has this relationship with Gagosian. She's 30s, 90s, 80s.
After seeing Johnson's modernist masterpiece, I walked around the campus of the Glass House, reflecting on the conversation I had had with the German woman at MoMA.
But that's with the architecture, I think it's not just about doing the right, it's not really like right or wrong. There's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
In a sense, the German woman is correct, but
The problem with postmodern architecture is that it gives too much credit to architecture. Architecture can't transform society. Only politics can. The question is, what kind of politics does a postmodern ideology produce?
Jürgen Habermas said the postmodernists sacrificed the tradition of modernity in order to make room for a new historicism. Postmodernism's alternate history tries to recover an authentic ethnic or racial identity against the homogenizing forces of modernity and so-called progress. But this is also what the Nazis did. They reached for authenticity in the mythic past. The German folk had been destroyed and proletarianized by industrial capitalism. The Nazis sought to recover a lost utopia of the Aryan people. Because they had lost faith in progress, many of the postmodernists' ideas were also inspired by the desire to reclaim a mythic lost past of ancient harmony.
If progressive humanism is a big lie, then all we have left are the cultural particularities that capitalism has undermined.
We cling to cultural particularity today because the kind of universality that modernity delivered is one in which we universally suffer, as wage slaves who can barely afford healthcare or housing. We no longer buy the narrative of progress. Our politicians don't have a convincing story for how it gets better from here. So we look to the past in order to cling to some kind of authentic identity, be that our race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, or gender. Tribalism, or ethno-nationalism, seem to be the only logical political expressions of the desire to reclaim one's authentic being. The ideas which modernism aspired to realize, on the other hand, were those of the Enlightenment: freedom, equality, and humanism. Just because we failed to realize these ideas doesn't mean they were bad ideas. What is needed is a political project which can make good on those ideas. Without such a political project, modernist design, despite its optimism, did not produce a utopia. Instead, it produced a dystopia. Crumbling housing projects, cheaply made, mass-produced IKEA furniture, and glass skyscrapers which house the headquarters of multinational corporations. Postmodernism treats modernism as a corpse whose death was well-deserved. But rather than a corpse, we should see modernism as a project which failed to live up to its potential, and which thus remains incomplete.
Contained within the urban housing block and the shelves of IKEA is a radical optimism. And if you squint hard enough, you can see the utopia there, waiting for us to realize it.